Hello, today I want to talk about Backrooms. This is my first time doing one of these. My aim here is to kind of give did I like the movie or not, was my, review of it, but I also kind of want to just analyze it and talk about the themes. By the way, spoiler warning for Backrooms. Go definitely watch the movie before you watch this, because I will talk about stuff that happens. I was really excited for this movie. I was also kind of worried because I didn't know exactly what they were going to do with the concept. It started with this kind of just image, kind of a setting. It leaves a lot to the imagination, which is I think part of why it's so effective. And then I thought what are they going to do with this exactly? Are they going to make this into a story, or are we just going to watch a dude walking around in the back rooms, which is kind of what the trailer looked like a little bit. But I thought they did a good job. Aesthetically, I think it was really... There were parts of it that were really amazing. So I remember watching the original Backrooms videos made by the director when they first came out, and they were so cool and well made, and I love that they made a real set of it, and he does such a good job in those sort of handheld camera aesthetic scenes. That is all really cool, really suspenseful. So the movie is about two characters, one of which is a furniture store owner, and the other is his psychologist. We kind of, discover and start to explore the back rooms through his perspective. And then, he goes missing. The psychologist goes looking for him. And then it tries to sort of incorporate some themes as it continues. And I think, one valid criticism you could make of the movie is that it over-explains its themes a little bit. So, there's this kind of trend where the scary thing always has to be a metaphor for trauma. It's usually a metaphor for trauma.
To a lot of stuff about mental illness and trauma and
Get Out, metaphor for racism. Movies that tend to be it's very clear what it's sort of there's this kind of one-to-one correspondence about what it's trying to tell you that it's about. But what I find really interesting about Backrooms is that it seems to only partially grasp what it's about. Because one of the themes of the movie is memory and trauma, and honestly I want to say triggers, the sort of I guess behavioral loops we get stuck in, right? The characters have sort of doubles inside the back rooms that are kind of monstrous versions of themselves or distorted versions of themselves. And in a way, they remind me of, in popular psychology, what they call our inner child, especially because they're these kind of raw, vulnerable, seemingly not really intelligent. They're just these kind of raw, pulsating feeling machines. Maybe these characters the embodiment of those automatic responses we have, the part of us that's just purely sort of unthinking and mechanistic. But I just think that there's more going on in the movie that the movie doesn't acknowledge. It kind of So, the movie came from this image, like I said, that sort of, captured the public imagination. You can kind of project a metaphor onto it, and that's totally fine, but, I think that there's some other reason there is this public fascination with the back rooms. And the director of the film has a grasp of that, even if the script doesn't entirely acknowledge it. Okay, so what am I talking about? By the way, this is my bird Edward. So, you might ask, why are all the Backrooms videos and the movie set in the 90s? And that's part of what connects the aesthetic of the Backrooms to, Vaporwave, for example. And I guess the interesting thing about, the Vaporwave aesthetic is that it doesn't, try to reproduce 80s music exactly, right? What it does is it tries to reproduce the experience of what it's like to listen to 80s music, or maybe to remember listening to 80s music. Right, so I think that's very similar to the aesthetic of the Backrooms. Ostensibly, according to the movie itself, the reason that things get sort of distorted looking in the Backrooms is because of the imperfections of memory. But I don't, that doesn't quite match the fact that all of the distortions seem to be somehow the way that a computer would mess things up. The way that a computer might glitch out. Or a VHS or cassette tape. It doesn't look organic, it looks somehow digital, right? Surreal in the way that a corrupted file on your computer would produce a surreal image if you tried to open it up or something. And to me, this somehow indicates that the movie isn't merely about personal memory and these psychological processes, but it's also about our own culture. Liminality, it seems unique to modern culture, and I think that's because modern culture is characterized by the fact that it's rapidly changing all the time.
Imagine being trapped in a infinite beige space with buzzing drop ceiling, and there's no windows. It's like,
that's scary no matter who you are.
Yeah, oh, yeah. It's sensory deprivation fear, and I think that obviously the systems, economic, industrial, and otherwise, right now, forever, for all of our history, have been trending in the direction of like make the safe choice, path of least resistance, which typically don't account for our nervous systems as a species that evolved into a very specific sort of environment, and now we're kind of paving over that in like a blink of an eye.
There's this great book about liminality by Bjorn Thomason called Liminality in the Modern, where he talks a bit about this. So, as he writes, liminality refers to moments or periods of transition during which the normal limits to thought, self-understanding, and behavior are relaxed, opening the way to novelty and imagination, construction, and destruction. And maybe our obsession with liminality is an indication that we're living in a very liminal time. I guess part of what it feels like to be alive right now, and something that I think Gen Z is very sensitive to, is that things just feel extremely fragmented. Partially, when I say fragmented, I mean like, partially I think this is, for technological reasons, I think the internet is sort of making society less homogenous and more fragmented. I also just think our own experiences feels like somehow being flooded with way too much information all the time. You have access to literally anything that's known to humanity, right? Just by looking at Googling the right thing through your phone. And it's so overwhelming, and it's so hard to make all of it cohere together. I don't remember who said this, but somebody once pointed out that like for philosophers in the early modern period, like Rene Descartes or Spinoza, it was possible for a single person to at least possess a really good amount of like human knowledge, right? To like know, okay, here's what we know about math, here's what we know about science, and here's what we know about philosophy and literature. That's totally impossible now, right? And there's just so much information, and so much of it also is useless, or just confusing, or wasting our time. And I feel like the Backrooms has a little bit to do with that. The items in the Backrooms appear as fragmented. They appear out of order. They appear disunified. And it also explains why the Backrooms are overwhelmingly vast, right? They're infinite. In this way, the Backrooms are kind of like the author Borges' infinite library of Babel. And this is part of why I think the film isn't really just about personal memory. So I think in a way the Backrooms is using the aesthetics of digital memory corruption or something as a way of expressing this feeling of being utterly overwhelmed by information and unable to make it cohere as an individual, and then as a society, this increasing fragmentation that we're experiencing.
And I think that like you end up in, at least in this part of the world, a feeling of there's a rise in atomization. I don't think a lot of people would overly disagree with that in most like urban centers.
And on a cultural level, this state of extreme anxiety and uncertainty that we find ourselves in. So, here's the part where I give a rating. Does this make sense at all? I don't know. Here's what I give it. 4 stars. Goodbye.